Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. On today's episode, Moshe and I are excited to speak with product leader Yaron Lavie about his use of Base44 for vibe coding. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Yaron.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure. Hey, Moshe.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Yaron. Welcome to the show. We are excited to have you and talk about, I must say, one of my favorite AI products, but I shouldn't inject myself because usually we're not supposed to give our own opinions here on the show.
Moshe plugged me into Base44, so yep.
Yeah, it's pretty addictive, I have to say. So it's a lot of fun and it's pretty addictive.
I have a bit of a bias. I think where it's coming from.
Yes, that has something to do with it.
That has something to do with it, and I'm sure you can share with us that as well. And also the amazing story of how it started and where they are right now in the short amount of time that it happened. But before we get into that, I would love you to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, how did you get to product management? We always love to hear that, and where you are these days.
Okay, great. So thanks. So first of all, I've been doing product for a long time now, for about 25 years, which is a kind of a long time. Spent actually most of my career in FinTech and InsurTech. I started it before FinTech was a term. So it was primarily initially working on technology, various types of SaaS solutions for banks and insurance companies. I did that for about 20 years in different types of companies, starting from small companies, small startups to relatively large corporates. Kind of if I look at ARR ranges, I did everything from like 0 to 1. I did 15 to 100. I did 4 to 30, all sorts of different ranges of growing products in different levels of maturity. And in the last couple of years, I did a complete switch in terms of kind of the area the product operates in. I'm actually in retail tech, a company called Nexite, which has a very cool solution that combines hardware and software to deliver very deep insights and unique data sets for physical retail stores in the fashion space. And kind of that's what I'm doing now. We're a startup, very exciting.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I think we've only had one other guest on the show that dealt in hardware software. I think it was mainly hardware for product management. Pretty interesting space. We talk all about software these days, but there's still an element of hardware in product management. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's it. Although I have to say, in all honesty, a lot of the focus that I do is mostly on the data, on the software side. Hardware by nature evolves very slowly. And, when you're looking for, when I put on my product cap, looking for product market fit, you need to iterate very quickly. So most of the very fast iterations and validations we do with clients are always around data and software, much less so than the hardware itself. Gotcha. But I think, the hardware itself, specifically in our company, is what generates a very unique data set that we have. And obviously, over a longer period of time, that is what is creating our product moat, if you will.
Yeah, and it is definitely interesting, this type of products for people that are coming from outside of the product world. Sometimes when you tell them product manager, they will think, oh, it's any product. It doesn't really matter. I've been given to mentor people that were building special suits for hunters and special shelves units for garages, and I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? I don't know anything about these things. But it's really interesting and it's very challenging for someone like me to do that. And the lessons that I have from my usual work at product manager, some of them actually can apply to them as well. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I guess you have a user, you have a need or a pain point, you're trying to create value. You work on some constraints. There's a cost. How are they willing to pay?
Yeah.
All those things apply regardless of whether it's software or hardware, right?
Yeah, it's just the
Absolutely.
cycle is different, and the way to
Yes.
test and validate things is different. So
Yep.
that's the main things. But
Yeah, and you can't vibe code hardware, right?
yes, you can vibe code hardware,
Vibe code a car.
unless your 3D printer will start accepting your NLP based prompts.
There you go.
Yeah, no,
Then we'll
yeah,
see
actually, that's very true.
what is going to happen, what exactly is
Business
going to be
opportunity.
printed.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Here is a challenge
Yeah,
for anyone listening to
That's
us.
right.
If you have a printer, a 3D printer, and you can hook it up with ChatGPT and
Mhm.
tell it what to print and send us pictures of what actually came out, I would be really interested to see that. Uh,
100%.
Wow.
but
My head's spinning with ideas.
well, I don't have access to a printer like that. So, but if you do, then please do. Okay, so let's talk about what we're here for today. We are in the middle of a series for AI tools for product people, and you have been using Base44 for some time,
Mhm.
and you have used it in some interesting ways. So we would love to hear from you. First of all, tell us, what you used it for.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think, the main use case that I have, Base44, by the way, it's a great platform. People use it for different types of things. Some people use it to essentially build apps that they then distribute and or build up complicated websites or things of that nature. I actually had one thing that I wanted to do as a product manager. I had an objective of testing out a new product idea, and I wanted to do it in such a way that I could go from idea to a fully deployed initial functional prototype and be able to do that without getting any involvement from anyone else in our team. Okay, that was my number one objective. And the reason is I think everyone on the product world can probably relate to that. Everyone's completely busy, right? And sometimes you have this great idea. It's very difficult to get the R&D resources to it because it's always at the expense of something. But I had this great, this idea that came out from discussions with some of our clients that we wanted to try out. And I was looking for a way to put this into essentially go through the entire process of ideation, building it, deploying it, giving it to clients who can actually test this and provide us feedback. And I wanted to do that because it was something very experimental. I couldn't justify essentially prioritizing it in the backlog for our R&D teams. And I needed to find a different way of doing that. And I think prior to Base44, what I would do is try and come up with different types of visual mockups, whether I do it myself or with the assistance of our UX designer on Figma or anything like that. That would have been the option in the absence of a solution like Base44. I felt that wouldn't quite cut it because it wouldn't provide me the level of validation. But that was actually what I was out to do. Okay.
Mm.
And so I had this idea, and the idea was actually some new way to visualize existing data that we have in a way that was interactive, that wasn't supported before. Again, obviously, there's a lot of detail here, but I think most people can relate to these types of use cases. And I knew what the general idea was. It was actually very interesting. I didn't go directly to Base44. I actually tried out at the time, the first tool that I used Gemini to create some kind of a visual representation, a visual mockup. And it was actually very good in creating like um, like what seemed like a functional mockup. So it wasn't just a static HTML page. It actually injected quite a lot of kind of simulated data into it, and I can actually play around with it in a controlled demo. But it wasn't something that I could actually give up our clients, and it wasn't something that I could actually populate with real data.
Mm.
So it allowed me to define what this thing would look like and in essentially demonstrate it, but it didn't go as far as being able to hand it out to clients. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I reached that point where I had this idea. So I had a need, I created a concept, and now I wanted to take this and deploy it with clients, with also taking some of their data and loading that in. And I actually played around with Gemini because Gemini created this initial mockup. And I actually asked Gemini, how can I turn this from like just an HTML static web app into something that's essentially full stack that I can deploy and give to our clients. And it gave me back like a pretty detailed cookbook. It was beyond the capabilities that I had. I had to get people from DevOps involved and some developers. And I just didn't have the time, and I didn't have the available resources. And I was asking myself, is there another way of doing that? And I started looking for tools, and I landed on Base44.
Mm.
That was in April this year, which seems like an eternity in 2025. The way that
Yeah.
things are evolving,
I
it
know.
almost sounds like ancient history. And that's kind of where I landed on it. And at the time, it seemed like the most viable solution that allowed me to go from idea to something that's fully deployed.
Mm. Did you try other tools in parallel and ended up with Base44, or that was like the first and last one you tried?
Yeah, so I tried, I went with the usual suspects, which is obviously, Claude and ChatGPT with its ability to spin up web apps, and Gemini. And by the way, they were pretty good in terms of spinning up just pure kind of HTML web apps. I was also considering Lovable, but I felt that Lovable didn't have the depth that I needed in terms of actually spinning out a full end-to-end app. It still
Mm.
required some deployment effort. At the time, Base44 was the only solution that allowed me to go really end-to-end and full stack.
Right.
Okay.
And okay, so let's I do have questions about the data that you put in there and
Mhm.
how secure is it or how do you feel it is secure? We talked a little bit about security in enterprises of LLMs, but here you were talking about you wanted to have real data and the users actually using it. So
Mhm.
so what did you do with that? And I assume maybe I shouldn't assume. I assume you kept it hosted on Base 44, or did you bring it in, did you take the code out and host it yourself?
No, so yeah, it's I hosted it on Base44, which is,
Mhm.
I think if I tried to redeploy it, it would essentially bring me back to the problem that I had previously, which is needing to um, get other people involved beyond product.
Mm.
So I kept everything within Base44. We took data. I have to say that the data that we took in and consumed was anonymized. It was kind of, I want to make this useful. It was pretty aggregated data. So by the time we aggregated this data, although it was client originated, it wasn't very sensitive.
Mm.
Um, I didn't, I assumed, and by the way, I gave access to this to a very limited user base. In other
Mhm.
words, I still have some, for this particular purpose, I do have some concerns around the security. I wanted, my number one objective was not necessarily to build something very robust, very scalable, very controlled. It was much more about the speed of getting something out there so I can get real feedback with our clients, and I provide them with very limited access. It's not something that we kind of open up to all of our clients. It was
Right,
provided in a controlled basis. Okay.
right.
Mhm.
Okay. And
I think if I wanted for something much more secure, first of all, I would obviously take this to our entire team and think much more broadly. In this case, it's something that was kind of very much, if you think about it, was like an expanded experiment as opposed to something that I would consider full enterprise grade,
Mhm.
security, auditability, things of that
right,
nature.
That's what I'm thinking about. This is a time box experiment to where you're testing this out with a select group of people, gathering that feedback and really judging the viability of this. And that way you can get those other people involved and say, hey, I experimented with this, that's viable. And now I can get the resources to, actually produce this and
That's
Yeah.
spot on. In other words, it's really getting to this gating stage where I feel confident enough that
Mm.
this requires the additional effort. Now,
Yep.
again, Base44 is a very sound platform. They do have security related capabilities, but it wasn't something that there was a kind of a major concern at the time. It's much more about agility. So I did trust the fact that they do provide, guardrails around security. But Matt, to your point, indeed, it was something that was time-based. So I view the risk of actually running the data in that platform as
Mhm.
something very, very constrained and very controlled.
Mm.
They do have recommendations in their app for security. And I even saw a post, I don't remember if it was on their Discord or on LinkedIn or somewhere. I remember seeing a post that the number of clients that actually go through the security and they have to kind of nudge them all the time to remind them to do that. And the founder was really surprised that people are not taking action, that they give them here all the security you have to do, but people still don't do it because it's not obvious for most people building on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, by the way, initially you did require to be, at the time, they didn't support login beyond Google. So everyone had to be a Google user to get in,
Mm,
which did provide, a certain level of control and constraint on who can actually log in. It
mhm,
wasn't something that was publicly deployed. So I think at that particular point in time, I felt that it was sufficient.
I see. I see. So tell us a bit about your experience with Base44. For those who never have seen it in the past, and why did you like it?
Yeah. So first of all, just to give you an idea, it's essentially, I guess, as like any modern vibe coding environment, you get a when you set up Base44, you start chatting to it. You essentially have like two sides on. You have a left side uh, pane in which you essentially talk to the app. You chat to it through a chat-based interface, and based on those chat-based instructions, it dynamically builds the application that you can see on the right hand side. And every time you make a request, it immediately modifies that in some kind of a preview mode. And once you've reached something that you're happy with, you essentially click publish. It takes a snapshot of what you build and publicly deploys that. Um, Generally, so in theory, like opening it up and starting to do something is something that seems very, very accessible. You just open it up and start talking to it and saying what you want. In terms of, I guess, doing it right as opposed to just starting to do something, right? Um, it does require, and by the way, this is one of the things that I love about this. Um, you need to give it context. As with any LLM, the more context and the more guidance you give it, the better the outcome. So, and by the way, I think this is also one of the reasons that it's great for product, because to really spin it up to get to the best outcomes, you need to start at a very high level. You need to define what is the overall objective of the app or the module that you're building, and then explain the key user flows, the key personas, the key entities that you want in that. And you do that kind of top down. And once you do that effectively, it understands your intent and it builds a foundation correctly. It builds the right entities, the right data schema, the right correlations, the right user flows, et cetera, et cetera. It is really important in these environments, I mean, especially in Base44, that you build the foundation right. Kind of when you build it in a structured way, you get something that is very robust and is expandable.
Mhm.
If the foundation doesn't have the real intent that you have in mind, and you've built something trying to get it to almost like quote unquote re-architect itself, can be very difficult. So you need to
Mhm.
get the foundation right. And by the way, this is it's very interesting. I mean, when I just started out, and as I kind of mentioned earlier on, that wasn't my first choice. I started building this out in Gemini first, and in actually also in ChatGPT.
Mhm.
And my first attempt at taking what I had and migrating this into Base44, I did something pretty simple, which is I took a screenshot from what I built in Gemini. I uploaded it. I provided a bit of context and I said, try and build this. And in all honesty, it failed miserably. Okay. Because it was essentially, it didn't have an understanding of the context, the intent, or anything like that. It was at that point that I looked at different types of forums, and it hit me that I needed to provide the right context into what it is that I'm trying to build. And what I did at that time is I went back through, it was actually in Gemini. I said, dear Gemini, look, I want to take everything that I've just built together with you, and I want to recreate this in a vibe coding environment. So give me a description of everything that we've just built together with a structure of, what's the objective? What are the key entities? What are the key personas? What are the key user flows? And make this detailed enough so that someone using a vibe coding can rewrite that. And it created this great kind of detailed PRD, which was very structured, very top down. I downloaded that, uploaded this into Base44 and said, well, follow these instructions. And it actually worked extremely well.
And that's what we were hearing everyone else is doing as well. So we hear a pattern over here on how to use it. And eventually because at the end of the day, Base44 is using those LLMs. You can even choose which LLM you want to use for your code. And it's all matter of playing with the number of tokens that you have. So why not just do it at one place rather than have to jump between tools? So eventually, those things should really be under one umbrella, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. I think, from my experience right now, I think OpenAI are doing an amazing job of constantly enhancing ChatGPT and it truly understands your individual context, and it builds up a very detailed profile about kind of the terminology that I use in my work. So a lot of the kind of initial designs or initial thinking, I actually do in ChatGPT just because it's so knowledgeable about my domain. But when it comes to actually then moving away from, thoughts and discussions and high-level PRDs and into building something, that's where I port this over to Base44. But this by now, I think a lot of this kind of ideation of, doing these top-down documents is probably become over the last few months kind of a best practices approach.
Yeah. And we've seen it called prompt engineering in the past, but I was listening to a podcast the other day. It said context engineering is the new thing, because context is the key to all this. And this is a similar workflow that like Moshe and I've talked to other guests about. You start in one tool. I start in Copilot, let's say, Microsoft solution. I start in there. I will, ask it questions about my work environment, the different artifacts that it has access to. And then I'll tune the prompt, get it to where I want it. And then I can go to like Figma Make and then give it to Figma Make and actually do the prototyping. So similar workflow of using one tool to get to another tool. One day, one tool is going to do it all, I guess, maybe. But, we're seeing a similar pattern, and then breaking things down to, like you said, start at a high level, but break things down into nuggets. Don't give it too much to think about, because the model will then drift off and start to like get overwhelmed by things. So to break it down into smaller bites is something else we hear a lot.
Yeah, actually, I found that as a best practices approach when I want to build something new, when I want to expand the capabilities, add a new module, whatever. I start first of all in what's called discussion mode, where we discuss the idea, and it clearly instructs Base44 not to code anything. It gives me these ideas. Once I get to a solid idea, I then ask it to turn it into a step-by-step build-out plan, where I ask it to build it one step at a time. Essentially, it's like breaking up an epic into individual testable, shippable units, but doing this in a sort of like in a very, very, very concise manner. And I ask it to gradually build it piece by piece, and then give me the manual QA script that I need to run after everything's been delivered. So I build something, tells me what I should expect, what I should test. I test it out and then gradually build these things. And I've seen this pattern works extremely well. By the way, I mean, obviously you're seeing this with all the tools. The level of evolution that I've seen across the different models of LLMs. Every time there's a new release of one of these LLMs, obviously, anyone using Base44, which runs the major LLMs behind the scenes, obviously you benefit from this immensely. And I guess everyone who's using these tools is experiencing that. So, the experience when I started out I guess in April, is very different from the experience right now, which is kind of much more controlled, much more flawless, uh, fewer drifts, etc., etc.
Yeah, yeah, I did notice that as well. I have one question for you about the way that you have to give it context, and you didn't really understand what you wanted without the context. Do you think that this is because you didn't really tell us exactly what you were building, but the product that you were building was unique or some novel idea or something like that? Or and the reason I'm asking this question is because the thing I built at Base44 was an LMS to replace to use it for a learning management system for a course that I was building. I didn't give it any context. I just gave it a very short paragraph to tell him I want an LMS to manage my course, and I gave it maybe a few more details, and it gave me a really, really good solution that I built on top of. So maybe they have already templates of things that are already existing out there that the model already know how to deal with. So if you tell him it's an LMS or an ERP or a CRM or whatever it is, it will already know what it is. Where if it's something that it's new or it doesn't know and never built before, then you have to tell it much more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was kind of what I was building. Actually, I can talk about two use cases. One is I was building some kind of interactive analytical dashboard for different types of sales and customer behavior KPIs, which was pretty unique because it included some very unique data elements that are unique to what we build at Nexite. And so it didn't really have anything to learn from, which is why this was so critical and providing the context was so critical. However, there was one other module that we built and that I personally built in Base44, which was some kind of an interactive calendar. And Moshe, in that particular context, that was absolutely right. I mean, I didn't need to provide much context because it knew what a calendar looks like. In fact, it actually knew better than me, which is, I think, one of the things that I love about this. When you want to, and again, I think this is for us in product, when you want to build something that is, you're building it because you need some kind of general purpose tool, or you need some kind of feature parity with competing products. It could be a calendar. It could be something like a messaging tool. It could be something similar where, it could be some kind of a feed, something that we know you don't want it to look unique. You want it to look like a standard calendar or a standard messaging app. I think that's where it really excels because it's got so much context to learn from. And it's actually, it's sort of like, it saves so much work because I don't need to do any research about what a typical calendar looks like. I can just rely on it.
Exactly.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
By the way, these are things that, like building a calendar or building, again, these examples of calendar or messaging, because these are general purpose capabilities in a product, I found this both in my current role and in previous roles, very difficult to justify why we need a development team to work on something that is so like plain vanilla, right?
I know.
Yeah. You can never find the real justification for spending something that's really you're trying to catch up, you're trying to reach feature parity with maybe another product, as opposed to building something that is a true differentiator for our product offering. And I think tools like Base44 really make it very easy to come up and build something that eventually will be very, very complete.
Yeah.
Just because it fills out the missing pieces of these like common modules that are out there.
It reminds me of the days as a product manager that I pulled my hair off when the designers and the developer spend weeks and weeks designing the login pages and the logout pages and the user management pages. And I'm like, people have developed, millions of people have developed this already. Why do we have to spend so much time on this? And it just drove me crazy. So all of those things that people already developed in the past, they're not unique to us. We have to focus on the things that make our product unique and that special value that we're creating.
Yeah.
I really like it the way that you put that tools like that can help. But then we are talking about the production grade versus, or prototype slash MVP grade versus production grade. Where
Yeah, absolutely.
where does it stand?
So for us, I think it was pretty clear. I mean, I think once I got the validation, at some point, first of all, I felt that I hit a certain ceiling in terms of depth of user experience. And, I wanted to add another layer of interaction when you drill down into the data. And I felt that, at least at the time, it was beyond the capabilities of Base44. And that's where we essentially took a step of saying, okay, this is great. This is a good starting point. Now let's build this with our core development team and essentially, refactor the entire thing. I mean, we didn't actually take the Base44 code itself, but essentially rebuild everything that we've already proven and built out in Base44 and rebuild it from scratch using our own development team. That was done as soon as we got the validation. And in theory, you can. I mean, this is not saying anything. I love Base44. It's a great environment, but for us at least, at that point, I felt that we just need to sort of pause it there and then build it natively from scratch. It did save us a lot of time because, by the way, we obviously generated all the user stories directly out of Base44 because it had all the context. That was, by the way, kind of another interesting idea. I asked Base44 to break it down by stories. We use internally a custom GPT to write our own user stories. So I actually fed that into our own custom GPT. And so the handoff between that and putting this back into our backlog in Jira was pretty easy. Again, it's another kind of hack doing it the other way around of exporting it and trying to migrate this. But at that point in time, it actually felt that it was cost effective to build it internally. Okay. I mean, keep in mind that our developers also use, their own, tools to accelerate coding. So
Yeah, of course.
obviously that that handoff was actually pretty smooth.
Yeah. Did the developers look at the code that you generated to see if it's usable in any way?
Yes. And in all honesty, they didn't like what they saw.
Okay.
So I mean, they kind of felt that it added a lot of unnecessary code, especially when, like, the first version of the code was pretty good, but as you iterate with it over time and add features and remove features and play around with it, their impression was that the code is highly inflated. And they didn't try to refactor the code itself. They started from scratch.
So maybe there was a lot of tech debt inside the code.
Yeah, there was some kind of, it's gradually, I mean, over time, it does create its own, for lack of a better term, some tech debt. Yes.
That's funny.
This is what we see when you're like, hey, a tool like Lovable, where it's like it does a button and does a color, and you're like, no, I don't want that color, and you ask it to change it, and it goes, oh yeah, I see. Let me change that for you. And then it doesn't change it, but it says that it has.
So maybe the
That's
code
just
has it, but it's not
the
coming
code has it.
in
It's just
real
not
life.
reflecting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a
But I
different
did
type
like
of tech debt.
Yeah, I did like Base44. I think when I was using it, I used it again to do like a FinTech, solution, and they kind of had already a template for it. To your point, Moshe, I think they already kind of knew how to build this thing. But I think it did some sort of check. It reviewed what it was producing, and so it kind of validated, hey, how does this look? I think that was a feature as part of like the Base 44 offering, from what I remember.
Mm.
So it tries to do its own validation so that you're not getting quite as frustrated with it. I think a lot of what people we've spoken to, there's a frustration level. You get to like 80-90% of the way there. Looks cool, but you can't quite get to that next level. Like it's just not doing it for you.
Yes, you do hit that ceiling at some point. I think it's improving over time, but it's still, we have, I think it was very clear to us, right, at some point when we looked at the code that the code itself is not something we can migrate. And the same with kind of look and feel. I actually got our product designer to look at it and through Base44 to play around to make sure that it looks as close to our design system as possible. It looked pretty good, but it didn't quite get there. So it was good for those experiments, but then again, we needed to go to actually we needed to go through user stories, through Figma, through everything, and then kind of build it ourselves. Obviously, it accelerated everything, but we're not at a point where we can actually take this and migrate
Yeah.
this over as is.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe in a few months, who knows, with the,
That
the,
was
the
my
rate
next
of
question.
evolution
How
of this.
how are your designers taking this? Engineers obviously take their work very personal, and designers do as well. So how are they seeing these tools like Base 44?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the main feedback that I got is that it seems to come up with good solutions in their own world. But when you've already built a system with a certain look and feel, with a certain design system, and it can't adapt,
Hmm.
and you want the flow to work, you take this as like a good rough first draft for what you do, but then you need to rethink a lot of the user flows. But again, it's like I think for everyone, I mean, both of the developers and the product designers, providing this as a context of what is the idea is much better than trying to write it up or articulate it. Or I think once you've got something that you can play around with, you could
Hmm.
also test some usability issues very early on
Yeah.
and iron them out. So I think all in all, I think it's empowering for everyone.
I think I mentioned it before in the podcast related to this that Marty Kagan was advocating as early as Inspire, this book, to get rid of stories, user stories, and epics, and just to have prototypes, working prototypes, to give to the developers to work on. So we're still not there yet, I think. But as you said, seeing how it works for usability and then for the developers to actually develop something that will work is much better than just the words that are being produced. To tell them, this is how you do it. Another note
Absolutely.
Yeah, another note that I want to mention about the validation that Matt was mentioning before. It does give validation about errors that happen, and then it asks you if you want to fix it, and then it will fix it for you, of course, taking tokens as well. But what impressed me one time was that after 11 times that it claimed that it did something and it actually didn't do it, it actually told me how to put a debug option in my code and to give
Yeah.
in the results from the debug from the console. And then once I did
Yes.
that, it knew exactly what was the problem and it fixed it. So I was very frustrated that it took it 11 trials by me that I couldn't tell it to do it in any other way. 11 times is enough to think about different ways how to tell it to do the same thing. But after the 11th time, it was like, okay, just do this and this and this. And I followed its instructions and I was impressed by that.
Yeah, actually, that happened to me on a number of occasions.
Mhm.
And it's like, the kind of like the method of last resort to try and fix things.
Mhm.
But every time it hit this wall and suggested it, it actually ended up fixing
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
problem. So yeah,
So
yeah, it's a
I would have hoped he didn't let me do it 11 times, but maybe I counted after, but maybe I don't know 4 times or 3 times. I mean, just don't test my patience with you.
yeah. I think the personality trait that I love about Base44 is that every time I suggest an idea, it always sounds like a great idea to Base44. Whenever I talk about a new feature, it always provides feedback that this is a great idea for a feature. It's always
Yeah,
nice to get this
that's every
reassurance.
LLM. That's every LLM does it.
Yeah,
pleasers.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then, it's as equally confident in its ability to think that it's solved as it is in apologizing for not having resolved the problem. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I think it is getting better. I mean, when I observe this over time, when we just started this out again in April, there was a big wow factor to the fact that you can get something, and we were very tolerant. Every time you become less and less tolerant, and I think
Yeah.
it obviously is improving.
Yeah. One thing to also mention about Base44, unlike some of the other products in the market, is that it creates a full stack. You don't need to integrate like a base, like Supabase or a backend system. It all comes built in the product, but I think it depends on the level of license you're getting, right?
Yes, so I'm using the builder license, and it allows me to do that. And actually, kind of going back to the first point of why we chose Base44, that was the primary reason that we went for that, because it was entirely full stack, deployable at a click of a button. Essentially, what you get once you click deploy, you get a URL, and that URL is live, and you essentially got a fully deployed web app. Okay.
Mhm.
And again, at the time, that was the best. I think that was the only viable solution when we started out that didn't actually go full stack all the way.
Yeah.
And to me, that's great,
Yeah.
because again, it's very, again, from a product perspective, it's extremely empowering.
Yeah.
You're not dependent on anyone else.
Right.
Did
Right.
you use any of the other integrations that it offers, or did you just load the data in, like you said
No,
earlier?
we haven't I haven't tried any of the integrations. However, actually this is something pretty cool. It's not like an explicit integration, but at some point I wanted to, as I mentioned, we use like this tool to manage sales data with different types of KPIs, and I wanted to add something very simple that we didn't have, that I wanted to introduce, which is multi-currency support, because we're gathering sales data from different countries. And it built it out straight away, including some integration to some service to fetch currency exchange rates out from the web, which worked very well. I mean, we validated the numbers; they all turned out to be very accurate, and it sort of like created its own integration into some kind of a web-based data source of exchange rate data that just happened behind the scenes without me having to actually explicitly define any points of integration or anything like that.
I like that you mentioned that. When I was doing the FinTech with them, it actually went off to Yahoo. Yahoo is still used for a good stock market ticker, so it actually pulled in live Yahoo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by the way, one thing to mention about kind of one of the reasons also, I'm sure you'd referred to this very early on why I selected Base44. There's also like a very strong local community thing. When I it was started by a guy named Moshe. You've probably, I mean, this was probably mentioned in the past. He was a sole entrepreneur that built this out on his own, and very early on, it's sort of like it was kind of like a well-known secret in the local product community here where I'm based in Tel Aviv, that this tool exists. And he was part of this community. We had this closed WhatsApp group where he would ask for feedback, and we'd actually provide feedback, and and he would respond straight away and coming up with features, and that allowed him to iterate very quickly and also to build a very strong following. I think that's one of the other things that drew me to use Base44, just
Mm.
because I felt like I was part of a community building this great new tool.
Yeah.
And and by the way, I mean, it's now, I mean, he was like a solo entrepreneur. Now he got acquired by Wix. I think it was in June, and
So
and it's yeah,
for our audience that are not familiar with the story, he started it, I believe, in January this year, and he sold it
yes.
in June. So after 6 months, he sold it to Wix for $80 million. So that
Yeah.
was a huge sale in a very short time, all within the ecosystem in Israel. So no outside investors or anything.
Yeah. It grew it up completely in Bootstrap. And I think for the first few months, most of these users were actually here in Israel. I think ever since I've been watching the progress, they've actually made very significant strides into. I mean, at that point in time, it was really like a very niche solution. It wasn't. I don't think it even appeared on the radar of the larger vibe coding environments. But now it's actually become pretty prominent, also in terms of traffic and users. And I think for Wix, it has actually become quite a significant part of their growth in ARR.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, we've come quite a long way. And interestingly, I mean, there's still a very close-knit community, still on this WhatsApp group where they announce new releases and still
amazing.
gathering direct feedback from him as well on
Mhm.
new features and on problems. So I think I mean, I think it's a learning for everyone in product to be very close to your customers, but I think he's really taken this to the
Yeah,
extreme.
yeah, amazing. We always ask on the pod also if there are three most favorite features and least favorite features or things that should be improved in Base 44. What would those be?
Yeah. So I think the three most favorite ones are, first of all, the fact that it's like end to end, from idea to something fully deployed, full stack on your own. That to me, as someone in product, I think is one of the favorite things. The second is the fact that you can replicate things that are very common. Like, I mean, we mentioned this around calendaring, messaging. If you want to create something that is a replica of something that's out there, I think that works extremely well. Um, and the third, I think the visual output is good. I mean, the actual usability of it in terms of visual output. I would add as like, I mean, you asked for three, so I'm gonna get this fourth one. I think the fact that I was able to, this anecdote about bring in exchange rates to me is something that was great. It's like, not having to worry about adding additional data, which, like in a traditional world, I need to look at data sources and how do I license them, et cetera, et cetera, and just telling it to do that. I
Yeah.
think that to me is something really, really great. And in terms of not so great ones, the fact that it's full stack has limitations. I didn't try it with an external database, but the fact that like we cannot explicitly control the behavior of the database is a limitation. And by the way, this was one of the reasons that I knew that this was very limited to, at least for my use case,
Mm.
for initial prototyping, and I need something that is much more controlled, where we fully control the entire stack. That to me is one of the limitations.
Hmm. What about well, maybe you didn't need like mobile apps or things like that, but right now I believe it's only React and it's only for responsive web apps, right?
Yes. By the way, it does responsive extremely well. Whenever we tried something and we tried to run it on a mobile, it ran extremely well. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially it's responsive web apps. You know, I mean, it's good enough also if you want to try out designs for a mobile app. If you start just with a mobile, responsive mobile web app, that's a good first try.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
as interactive as a native mobile app, but I think
But
for
if
some
someone,
of these experiments, yeah,
yeah,
I think it's pretty good. Yeah.
if someone wants to build a mobile app, a native mobile app, that's not the tool for them, as simple as that.
No, it's not a tool for a native mobile app. But
Yeah,
again, I think if you want to try out different ideas for a mobile web app, for a mobile app, for a native mobile app,
yeah,
if you can do this initial ideation experimentation here as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Great. I don't think I have any more question. What about you, Matt?
I just want to note that they do have a public-facing roadmap, which I think is pretty cool. So if you're looking to see what they're going to do next, it does feature roadmap, and then it also lists out integrations. And so I think that's pretty cool that they do.
Mhm.
But in terms of questions, Just a philosophical question. Where do you see vibe coding going within the next, we won't talk years, but we'll talk like months in the AI world. But we'd love to hear, what do you think the next steps? Do you think it will always kind of be a cool prototyping tool, or do you think it will ever get production level use cases?
Wow. First of all, I think, going full production, I think it's going to take longer than we think. I mean, because if our appetite was just for a basic web app of something that we could settle for 2, 3 years ago, it's probably there. But over time, as we add more and more AI, things of that nature, I don't think it's quite there yet. By the way, I did try at some point their AI agent, where you load the data and interact with it through an LLM with different definitions of personas and system prompts, etc., etc. At the time when we experimented this, it didn't function very well. So I'll be completely honest, I haven't tested it over the last kind of couple of months, but it felt to me, as we move towards more native AI capabilities, you do want to be in control. I think it's going to take a while. I think it's going to take a while. And I mean, think about it this way. It's not I mean, think about an entire ecosystem. So vibe coding, to me, I think, I'll never go back. I mean, I'd always want to vibe code some initial prototype, but we have developers that are using their own tools to accelerate what they're doing. And those tools are evolving as well. And they want to be, I think they always need this level of control. Certainly when you look at like complicated solutions that have lots of different components and someone needs to look at everything and get the context of not just one individual module or one individual screen, but an entire system. I think getting these tools to look at a system-wide approach is going to take a while.
This goes back to that question of, is AI going to replace us or not? And I think the continuing thing we don't see, I don't think that it will. I think it's just going to be a partner. And it's going to be a great partner along the way. It's going to get better and stronger, as we all do. But, it just goes to show you that designers, product managers, engineers all have a role to play. And it just ups our game and allows us to do other things strategically. So,
Yeah. It's like, I mean, the best analogy that I have is moving to cloud from on-prem to cloud, right? I mean, traditionally, you had to think about deployments. You needed to think about the hardware that it runs on. That, I mean, we tend to forget, but before cloud, that was a huge consideration, right? And it took up a ton of effort for developers, for designers, for everyone. And now we completely take this for granted, and we just think in more abstract terms. We just don't need to think about it. I think AI just makes us more empowered, and you think about in more abstract system-wide terms.
Amazing. I think we end up with the same conclusions every episode, but that's probably a good thing. We are validating our thoughts here.
Okay.
Where can people reach out to you?
So I think best is obviously on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on posting on LinkedIn, but if people have questions or anything like that, or they just like to connect, happy to do that through LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It was a real pleasure. I'm glad that hopefully we could share some of this know-how and help out the community.
Well, Yaron, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Moshe. Thank you to all the listeners, and we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.